The former Minister of National Economy of Kazakhstan, 44-year-old Kwan Bimv, did something awful to his wife, 31-year-old Sultanat Nukunowa. He tried very hard to cover up his crime and make it look like an accident. However, this story quickly became very famous. The family of the woman who died wanted a very public trial. Now, millions of people in Kazakhstan and around the world are watching this case. It's important to know that a few years ago, Bimv was found guilty of taking large bribes and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But he was released after just 1 year. Many people think that Bimv will use his money and connections to avoid serious punishment this time as well. Everyone knows he is guilty, but the big question is how long his sentence will be. To understand this case better, we need to look at the history of the couple's relationship and learn about their lives. We will also try to understand why the trial is so special and why Bimv wanted a jury trial. Here's some background on the defendant and his family. Kwan Valovich Bishay was born on April 11, 1980, in the city of Kizilorda in the Kazakh SSR. He was the oldest of 2 children in the family of Vakan Bishay, a deputy in the parliament, and his wife, Alnur Libova. Kwan's mother became a businesswoman in the 1990s. Before her son's high-profile arrest, she owned several large companies. In 2024, she quickly transferred most of these companies to relatives to keep the assets within the family. In 2018, when her son was involved in a corruption case, she defended him publicly. The prosecution wanted a 12-year sentence, but Alnurlai called it a destruction of her son's personality. Kwan grew up with his younger sister, Aruzan, born in 1984. He earned 3 higher education degrees, one from the Kazakh Academy of Management, another from Taz University, and a scholarship program at George Washington University in the United States. At age 26, he completed a PhD in economic sciences. In 2000, Kwan started his career as a bank manager. He interned briefly at the Ministry of Economy and then held senior positions in big companies for several years. In 2016, he became the head of the Ministry of Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. However, just 8 months later, he was dismissed amid a scandal and imprisoned for taking large bribes. He was sentenced to 10 years, but was released on parole after only 1 year. He apologized to the head of state, Nurlan Nazarbayev, who pardoned him. Before meeting Sultanat Nukunowa, Kwan was married twice. His first wife was Agarim Rova, whom he married in 1999 when he was still a student. In 2000, they had a son named Ali Sandavalakan. But in 2004, this union broke up. In 2006, while serving as an advisor to the Minister of Economy and Budget Planning of Kazakhstan, he married for the second time. His second wife was Nazim Karman Babagalova, with whom he lived for 14 years. They had 3 children together. In 2020, they divorced at Nazim's request. Sultanat Nukunowa, whose full name was Sultanat Amangalova Nanova, was born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlodar, a city in northern Kazakhstan. She was the youngest of 2 children in the family of businessman Alman Geldinenov and his wife, economist Juma Gol. Her paternal uncle, Tarat Nanov, had a successful career in politics, leading the Regional Department of Entrepreneurship and Trade and serving as the head of the cities of Istis and Aksu. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat developed a deep interest in astrology. She read extensively on the subject, creating horoscopes and natal charts for her friends and classmates. Surprisingly, her predictions were often accurate. She decided to turn her hobby into a lifelong career. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering personal and online consultations, short-term and long-term forecasts, and advice on achieving goals, choosing a profession, and spiritual development. She also helped clients with love affairs, compatibility tests, and relationship advice. Her clients were exclusively women and girls. Sultanat quickly achieved financial independence by doing what she loved. She gained many followers on social media, and her services were in high demand, with consultations booked months in advance. She was living her dream life. In the spring of 2022, Bim stumbled upon Sultanat's page on a popular social network. He was immediately captivated by her beauty and decided to reach out, booking an astrological consultation. However, Sultanat turned him down, explaining that she only provided services to women. This only fueled Bim's interest. He persisted in trying to get her attention, showering her with compliments and trying to gain her sympathy by insisting that only she could help him. Sultanat was flattered but continued to refuse to meet with him. She repeatedly offered him online consultations, but Bim was insistent on meeting in person. For several months, Bimv did not give up. He found out everything about her, where she lived, who she communicated with, where she went, and what she liked. Despite this, Sultanat told her friends about her persistent admirer, but she found him unpleasant and irritating. Eventually, Sultanat agreed to a business meeting for a face-to-face consultation. Bimv made every effort to impress her, being polite and courteous. This first meeting was just the beginning. In a conversation with her brother, Sultanat admitted that Bimv was not her type and that their relationship would not work out. At first, neither Sultanat nor her family were overly concerned about Bimv's behavior. They believed that Sultanat, being strong and independent, could handle the situation. However, within a month, things started to change. Bimv managed to get close to her through her grandmother, expressing a desire to seek her blessing. This gesture touched Sultanat, but she still refused to have a relationship with him. In the fall of 2022, Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar and shared that there were no significant changes expected in her personal life. She confided in her brother that she was uncomfortable with the 12-year age difference between her and Bimv and that she was not attracted to him at all. According to her astrological calculations, Sultanat found that she and Bimv were not compatible at all. Despite this, less than a month after her visit to her parents, her brother Aybek saw a surprising post on social media. Sultanat announced that Kwon Bimv had officially proposed to her, and she had gladly accepted. This news shocked the entire family and her friends because she had recently told them that she didn't see a future with him. In December 2022, just a few months after meeting, Sultanat and Kwon had a lavish wedding. They organized an expensive banquet in one of the most popular venues in Astana. However, their marriage was not officially registered. They only had a special marriage ceremony in a mosque, so they were considered civil spouses. Sultanat's attitude toward Kwon changed dramatically. She frequently told her friends about how smart, educated, and well-read he was, and how he could easily talk about any topic. She also denied his guilt in the high-profile corruption case, claiming he was framed and imprisoned for someone else's crime. From the outside, they seemed like a happy couple. Kwon showered her with gifts, and Sultanat called him the most wonderful husband and said she would never regret marrying him. Her friends were happy for her, thinking she was very lucky. But this happiness did not last long. After the wedding, the couple moved into Kwon's parents' house. His parents lived on the first floor, while Kwon and Sultanat settled on the second floor. Kwon's mother, Almira, tried to take care of Sultanat, often giving her gifts and shielding her from household chores. However, she couldn't protect her from Kwon. Sultanat would visit her parents with her husband, but did not invite them to her home because it irritated Kwon and led to arguments. Less than a month after the wedding, on New Year's Eve, Aybek visited his sister and witnessed a disturbing scene. There was a large festive table set up for a small family gathering. When Kwon's cousin and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat realized she didn't have a gift for them. To solve this, she decided to give them a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought her but that she hadn't opened yet. This act enraged Kwon. He shouted that she had no right to give away something bought with his money and began to insult and call her names. The guests, seeing the heated situation, quickly left the house. Sultanat's parents, who tried to defend their daughter-in-law, were rudely stopped. To make things worse, the enraged former politician overturned the table with all the food and drinks, completely ruining the New Year's Eve party. Aybek was shocked and didn't know how to react. The next day, during a phone conversation, Sultanat confided to him that her husband's behavior had drastically changed after the wedding. She didn't know why, but hoped that the crisis would pass and everything would improve. Her brother suggested that she return home and end the relationship, but Sultanat firmly refused. 2 months after the incident, Sultanat unexpectedly sent her brother some selfies showing her face covered in terrible bruises. She asked him not to question her about it. Alarmed, Aybek tried to contact his sister, but she did not answer her phone. He then called her husband, who offered to meet for a man-to-man talk. At the meeting, Kwon told Aybek to mind his own business and refused to explain the bruises on Sultanat's face. He also couldn't say where she was, which filled Aybek with worry. Fortunately, Sultanat was found in her parents' country house, to which she had the keys. Despite the pleas of her loved ones, Sultanat returned to her husband, arguing that she loved him and would do anything to save the marriage. For a while, Kwon behaved impeccably, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her sake. They even went on a trip to a popular Maldivian resort and appeared very happy. However, photos from that vacation were later used as evidence in court, showing bruises on her body and fingerprints on her wrists, suggesting she had been roughly handled. After that trip, Sultanat did not complain about her marriage to her brother or parents, but her behavior and appearance spoke volumes. She lost a lot of weight, became withdrawn, and started wearing more revealing outfits, likely to hide the bruises and abrasions on her body. The once successful astrologer and popular blogger stopped holding appointments and even ceased giving online consultations. On social media, she only posted photos with her husband, claiming they were very much in love and happy together. It later emerged that Kwon had forbidden Sultanat from doing what she loved, cutting off her source of income and making her completely dependent on him. He also controlled all her movements and contacts. She couldn't meet friends without his permission, couldn't have lunch in a cafe without him, and even her phone calls and messages were monitored. Sultanat appeared everywhere only with Kwon, who acted in public as a loving and caring husband. Most of her friends were unaware of the horrors she was enduring at home and even envied what seemed like a perfect relationship. Once, during a candid conversation, Sultanat confided to a close friend that she was under total control by her husband. He forbade her to work, communicate with her parents without his knowledge, and was unjustifiably jealous, accusing her of cheating and constantly beating her. Her friend was horrified upon hearing this. Sultanat's friend advised her to leave her tyrannical husband immediately, but Sultanat only screamed in response, saying she didn't ask for advice, she just wanted to talk. The couple tried to save their marriage by seeking help from a family psychologist. However, Kwon rejected all the specialists Sultanat chose and insisted on using his own. During sessions, this psychologist convinced Sultanat that she was to blame for all their issues. In one of her last conversations with her brother, Sultanat expressed her suspicion that the psychologist was hired by her husband specifically to humiliate and demoralize her further. In the summer of 2023, Sultanat attempted to leave her husband and move to her parents' house for a while. However, a week later, Kwon came to take her back, urging her to give him another chance to save their marriage. He also suggested they move to his own house. Sultanat believed that a change of scenery might help their relationship, and she hoped that having a child together would change her husband's attitude. However, she could not get pregnant. In October, Sultanat made a final attempt to leave her abusive husband. She moved to a rented apartment that her brother helped her find in a hurry. However, only 10 days later, she returned to her husband and went through the Muslim marriage rite with him again in a mosque. She informed her family about this herself. On November 5th, Sultanat invited her parents, brother, and a few close friends to the BA restaurant, owned by Kwon's cousin, Baektan Bajanov. The family was celebrating the couple's reunion. Kwon behaved gallantly and courteously, showing care and affection towards Sultanat. He promised to protect and cherish her. That evening, everyone believed in the sincerity of his feelings and words. But tragedy was only days away. Terrible news. On November 9th, Sultanat's brother, Aybek, came home from work and was minding his own business when he received a phone call from a frightened relative. She asked if the news circulating on social media was true. Confused, he asked her to clarify. The woman sent him a link to a news item that said the former Minister of Economy had killed his young wife. Aybek was shocked but did not believe it was true. He had talked to his sister the day before, and she had mentioned leaving her husband again. She had asked if she could come to his place for a sleepover, and he told her she could come anytime, indicating where the spare keys to the front door were. But Sultanat neither came that evening nor the next day, and her phone had been silent since. Aybek rushed to his sister's house, but no one was there. Her husband was not answering his phone, and the situation was quickly escalating. Aybek decided to go to the family restaurant where Sultanat had last contacted him and look for answers there. On his way, he received a call from his frightened parents, who had also read the news and were trying to find out what had happened. Aybek couldn't answer them, but promised to look into it. At the restaurant, Aybek found many policemen. When they learned he was Sultanat's relative, they expressed their condolences, noting that his sister could not be helped and had died before the medics arrived. Aybek couldn't believe his ears. It felt like a monstrous mistake. But the terrible news was true. By the time Sultanat's brother arrived, Kwon had already been arrested and taken to the station as the main suspect. He categorically denied his guilt, claiming what happened was a horrible accident and that he was trying to help his wife. However, the evidence and testimonies painted a different picture. The tragic story unfolded further when Baektan Bajanov, the restaurant owner, was also taken into custody on suspicion of complicity. Initially, the suspect's lawyer insisted on his client's complete innocence, arguing that there was no evidence of guilt. However, it was soon revealed that the ex-minister and his brother had attempted to destroy evidence by deleting recordings from the restaurant's security cameras. Specialists managed to restore the footage, revealing shocking scenes that left no room for doubt. The investigation into this difficult case lasted almost 4 months, with the main suspect maintaining his innocence and behaving confidently, as if assured of his impunity. However, forensic experts noted that Sultanat had suffered extensive and severe injuries, some inflicted 6 to 8 hours before her death, indicating prolonged and brutal beatings. The suspect's lawyers tried to downplay his guilt, claiming that Sultanat had injured herself while drunk. However, the reconstructed sequence of events painted a different picture. On the evening of November 8, 2023, Sultanat and her husband attended a concert with friends. They quarreled during the event and abruptly left without explaining their departure. They went to Bajanov's restaurant, where they continued their argument in a VIP cabin. Surveillance footage showed Kwon retrieving several bottles of alcohol from the bar and retreating with his wife to the booth. During their drinking and heated argument, Sultanat announced her intention to leave him, which enraged Kwon. He slapped her, prompting her to call her brother and inform him of her decision to leave her husband. Sultanat attempted to leave the restaurant around midnight, but Kwon caught up with her and continued the confrontation outside. They argued for about 15 minutes before he convinced her to return inside. The hallway camera captured Sultanat's attempts to distance herself from her husband, who kept grabbing and shaking her. She eventually locked herself in a toilet, but Kwon kicked the door until it broke, forcing her to open it. He then struck her multiple times in the face and berated her, accusing her of living off his money. Accounts of what happened next vary. Kwon claimed that Sultanat, in a fit of rage, stripped off her clothes and jewelry and flushed them down the toilet to show she didn't need anything from him. Another version suggested he forced her to undress to humiliate her further. After the jewelry went down the drain, Kwon became even more furious, hitting her several times and pushing her so hard that she fell and hit the toilet. At trial, he maintained his innocence, but the evidence and circumstances told a different story, painting a clear picture of prolonged abuse and violence, that his political and professional career could be jeopardized by any scandal. However, after his release, he felt untouchable, emboldened by his perceived immunity. This increased arrogance and violent tendencies ultimately led to the dissolution of his marriage with Nazim Karman Babagalova. She described how the escalation of his abusive behavior over time and the final violent incident convinced her to file for divorce, prioritizing her safety and the well-being of their children. In her interview, Nazim highlighted how Biskenbayev's controlling nature and need for dominance had become unbearable. His multiple affairs and the blatant disrespect towards her were symptomatic of his broader personality issues. She emphasized that while she had initially defended him during his corruption trial, believing in his innocence or at least in mitigating circumstances, the subsequent behavior post-release revealed his true character. This realization came too late to prevent Sultanat's tragic fate, but provided a crucial perspective on the former minister's abusive tendencies. During the trial, the prosecution presented a harrowing picture of a controlling, violent man whose actions ultimately led to Sultanat's death. The forensic evidence contradicted Biskenbayev's claims that Sultanat's injuries were self-inflicted due to drunken falls. Instead, the evidence showed a pattern of sustained, brutal assault. The testimonies and video footage restored from the restaurant security system further supported this narrative, showing Biskenbayev's escalating violence and controlling behavior throughout the night. In the courtroom, Sultanat's family and friends painted a picture of a vibrant, independent woman whose life was tragically cut short by a man who could not stand to lose control. Her brother's testimony was particularly poignant, recounting their last conversations and his sister's desperate attempts to escape her abusive marriage. He described the chilling progression from the initial courtship, marked by relentless pursuit and superficial charm, to the ultimate descent into violence and control. Biskenbayev's defense tried to portray Sultanat as unstable and prone to exaggeration, but the overwhelming evidence and the testimonies of those who knew her refuted these claims. The details of the sustained abuse and the meticulous control Biskenbayev exerted over her life became clear, leaving no doubt about his culpability. The trial concluded with Biskenbayev being found guilty of murder with particular cruelty. The judge condemned his actions, emphasizing the prolonged and brutal nature of the assault that led to Sultanat's death. Biskenbayev was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, reflecting the severity of his crime and the impact on Sultanat's family and friends. The case also sparked broader discussions about domestic violence, the importance of recognizing warning signs, and the need for effective support systems for victims. Sultanat's tragic story became a poignant reminder of the dangers of abusive relationships and the critical importance of intervention and support. Her family vowed to honor her memory by advocating for stronger protections for victims of domestic abuse and raising awareness about the insidious nature of coercive control and violence. Family members of the deceased Sultanat expressed their dissatisfaction with the court's decision. They believed that the sentence did not adequately reflect the severity of the crime and felt that Kandik Biskenbayev deserved a harsher punishment, such as life imprisonment. They were also unhappy with the relatively lenient sentence given to Bakanbanov, feeling that his actions in helping to cover up the crime warranted a more severe penalty. Despite these frustrations, the trial and its verdict marked a significant moment in Kazakhstan's legal landscape, highlighting the need for stricter penalties for domestic violence and more comprehensive protections for victims. The case drew widespread media attention and public outcry, which in turn put pressure on lawmakers and the judicial system to address the inadequacies in how domestic violence cases were handled. The murder of Sultanat and the subsequent trial revealed systemic issues within the legal framework regarding domestic abuse. Public outrage over the initial charges of domestic violence, which carried lighter penalties, and the attempts by the defense to diminish the severity of the crime prompted a legislative response. In April 2024, amid the ongoing trial, Kazakhstan passed a law to toughen penalties for domestic violence, a direct outcome of the case's high-profile nature and the public's demand for justice. Throughout the trial, Biskanbayev's attempts to paint Sultanat as an unstable and provocative individual were thoroughly debunked by the overwhelming evidence, including surveillance footage and testimonies. The recordings recovered from the restaurant's CCTV system were particularly damning, providing a clear visual record of the abuse Sultanat endured and contradicting Biskanbayev's narrative of accidental injuries and self-infliction. The jury's verdict and the judge's sentencing sent a clear message about the gravity of domestic violence and the unacceptability of such behavior. However, the relatively moderate sentences highlighted ongoing challenges within the judicial system, including the influence of wealth and connections in mitigating punishments. In the aftermath of the trial, Sultanat's family vowed to continue advocating for victims of domestic abuse, using her story to raise awareness and push for further legal reforms. They hoped that her tragic death would not be in vain and that it would lead to stronger protections and support for those trapped in abusive relationships. The case also served as a stark reminder of the need for vigilance and support from friends, family, and the community in identifying and intervening in situations of domestic violence. Sultanat's story underscored the importance of not only legal but also social and psychological support systems to help victims escape abusive situations and rebuild their lives. In conclusion, the trial of Kandik Biskanbayev and Bakanbanov brought to light critical issues within Kazakhstan's handling of domestic violence cases. While the sentences were seen as insufficient by many, the case catalyzed important legal changes and sparked a broader conversation about the need for more effective protections for victims of domestic abuse. Sultanat's legacy, marked by her family's continued advocacy, remains a powerful symbol in the fight against domestic violence. Amanulnenov, Sultanat's father, had expressed his hope for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, believing that any other decision by the court would be unfair. This sentiment reflects the deep pain and loss experienced by Sultanat's family due to her tragic death. On the other hand, Sultanat's brother, Aybek, acknowledged that the 24-year prison sentence for Bishanbayev, who was 44 years old at the time of the verdict, is essentially a life sentence. Despite the family's disappointment with the court's decision, they may find some solace in knowing that Bishanbayev will spend a significant portion of his life behind bars for his heinous crime. The conclusion of the trial brings a sense of closure to Sultanat's family, although the pain of her loss will undoubtedly linger. Their commitment to seeking justice for Sultanat and advocating for victims of domestic violence serves as a testament to their resilience and determination to honor her memory. Our story unfolds on a seemingly ordinary night, December 1st, 2010. For Staff Sergeant Nathan Pei, it was a night that would change everything. Nathan, a dedicated serviceman stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, found himself racing against time. Known for his punctuality, it was highly unusual when his reliable alarm clock failed to wake him. He stirred from sleep at 11:00 p.m., much later than planned. Realizing with a jolt that he was late for duty, Nathan quickly woke his wife, Michelle. The house was quiet as he hurried to take a shower. After a rushed goodbye to his anxious family, he made his way to the garage. The night was still, broken only by the sounds of his movements as he prepared to put on his uniform and start his car. But before he could leave, the silence was shattered by a series of loud gunshots. In a matter of seconds, chaos erupted. Nathan's children and wife, drawn by the noise, came running. What they found was a scene of horror. On the doorstep stood Nathan, staggering, his body bleeding profusely. It was clear he was on the brink of collapsing. Michelle, stricken with terror, rushed towards her husband, her mind racing with fear. But before she could reach him, Nathan fell to the ground. The clock marked around 11:30 p.m. when the desperate call was made to 911. "My husband has been shot. He's bleeding. Please help him," Michelle screamed into the phone. The dispatcher, trained for such emergencies, quickly guided her through administering first aid. Frantically, Michelle tried to perform CPR on Nathan, but her efforts brought no relief. Paramedics arrived swiftly and Nathan was rushed to the nearest hospital. Despite the medical team's best efforts, the injuries were too severe. Nathan succumbed to a fatal neck wound, his life ending at the young age of 28. The news of Nathan's death sent shockwaves through his community. He was not just any man. He was an exemplary family man and a valiant serviceman. His murder, right on the doorstep of his own home in Las Vegas, sparked a public outcry. People demanded answers. Who could commit such a heinous act? What motives could possibly justify this brutality? Was justice served? These questions loomed large as the community grappled with the loss of one of their own. Born on February 12, 1982, in the village of Tamuning, Guam, Nathan Joseph Figs Payet led a life marked by both beauty and tragedy. Guam, a U.S. territory, is known for its stunning landscapes and strategic military significance. Growing up in such a paradisaical yet complex setting, Nathan was the third of 5 siblings. His family was close-knit, with his 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, and Eric, and his sister Carmela, sharing a deep bond. From a young age, Nathan stood out for his amiability and diligence. He was the peacemaker, the student who excelled without effort, the friend everyone gravitated toward. His early years were filled with the joys of island life. Swimming and surfing were not just pastimes, but passions. During his high school years at South High School in the neighboring town of Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle Anon Achu. It was love at first sight for him. Their friendship blossomed into a deep, enduring love, one that saw them through the highs and lows of life. They were inseparable, sharing every moment and every challenge together. When tragedy struck Michelle's family with the loss of her mother, Nathan was her steadfast support, helping care for her siblings alongside her. After graduating in 2000, Nathan proposed to Michelle, and they began their life together. Initially working as a receptionist in a local hotel, Nathan soon realized that to provide for his growing family, which now included their son Dion, he needed a more stable and rewarding career. This realization led him to enlist in the Air Force, a decision that brought them stability, but also eventually led to that fateful night. As we delve deeper into the investigation and the impact of Nathan's death in the following episodes, we aim to uncover not just the details of the crime, but also celebrate the life of a man who was so much more than the tragic end he met. Join me as we explore the life and legacy of Nathan Pay, whose story is a poignant reminder of the unpredictability of life and the enduring strength of love amidst loss. After Nathan joined the Air Force post-graduation, he was first assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. This move, while significant for his career, left Michelle alone with their young baby. Despite the distance, the financial stability brought by Nathan's career allowed them to realize their dreams. They built their own house, where their second child, a daughter named Niara, was born. As the head of the family, Nathan's success in the military fueled his and Michelle's ambition to attain the lifestyle they had once dreamed of, 6 years into their engagement. Nathan and Michelle celebrated their union with a grand wedding, an event that was a source of immense pride for their families. Nathan's mother beamed with joy at her youngest son's achievements. Eric, Nathan's brother, remarked on how Nathan was the first in the family to truly make something of himself. In 2006, Nathan's career took another positive turn when he was transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona and promoted to the position of weapons loading team leader for the A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft. His responsibilities expanded to include training in logistics and material management. His dedication to his job was evident, and his colleagues often noted his love for his work and his country. By 2007, Nathan's career advancements led the family to move to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. Here, Nathan took up a significant role as an assistant junior officer in charge of the supply section for the maintenance of combat aircraft. Alongside his professional growth, Nathan's family also expanded with the birth of 2 more sons, Drone and David. Michelle particularly fell in love with Las Vegas, finding it an ideal place to live. Eager to make her happy, Nathan chose a spacious and bright house close to the military base, ensuring a comfortable life for their growing family. Initially, the joy of purchasing their dream home overshadowed everything else. Michelle was thrilled with Nathan's surprise and quickly set about organizing their new life. However, as time passed, the family's expenses began to outstrip Nathan's earnings. The financial strain started to dim the happiness of their new home, highlighting the harsh reality that financial troubles could strain even the strongest relationships. In a bid to correct their worsening financial situation, Nathan decided to volunteer for deployment to Iraq in mid-2009. His 6-month deployment helped improve the family's financial condition significantly. Upon his return, he enjoyed a brief rest at home, but soon felt compelled to return to Iraq, driven by a sense of duty and the financial benefits it brought. During Nathan's absence, Michelle struggled with anxiety and the daunting prospect of managing alone with 4 children. Her fears about maintaining their standard of living without Nathan's income led her to seek employment at a corporate credit card telemarketing firm. There, she made new acquaintances and began to envision a future where she might own her own business. To further her ambitions, Michelle also enrolled in a school of aesthetics. However, the physical and emotional distance created by Nathan's deployments took a toll on their relationship. The constant travel and long periods apart cooled the once warm bond between Nathan and Michelle. In his absence, Michelle, craving affection and attention, began an affair with a colleague, Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a handsome local womanizer known for his devious past. Michelle's relationship with Michael, whom they jokingly called Sweet Rudy, became her secret escape from the loneliness and challenges of her life as a military wife. By the end of 2009, when Nathan returned home, it appeared that the distance and their trials had surprisingly benefited their relationship. Nathan was captivated by the positive changes in Michelle's appearance and demeanor, unaware of her affair. Nathan attributed the changes in Michelle's demeanor to her personal growth and dedication to their family. The children, having grown up largely without their father's presence, were also impacted by his frequent absences, which affected their upbringing. Nathan resolved not to leave his family for extended periods anymore, oblivious to the true reason behind Michelle's transformation. As Nathan found ways to earn additional income through night shifts and private baseball coaching for children, Michelle's act began to unravel. Once the family's standard of living started to decline again, Michelle's demeanor shifted dramatically, revealing the unstable foundation on which their recent happiness had been built. As Thanksgiving 2010 approached, the Pyatt household prepared to host family members for the holiday. Nathan's brother Eric and his wife Veronica were visiting for the first time in a while, and their arrival was meant to be a joyful reunion. However, the atmosphere they walked into was far from celebratory. It was immediately apparent to the guests that tension hung heavy in the air. Nathan and Michelle's relationship had deteriorated significantly. The spark that once defined their union seemed extinguished, and the strain was palpable, not just emotionally, but also financially. The signs were everywhere, from an almost empty pantry and refrigerator to the forced interactions between the couple. Just a week after this strained Thanksgiving, on the night of December 1st, 2010, Michelle engaged in a telling exchange with Michael Rodriguez. At 11:12 p.m., she received a message from him checking in on her well-being and discussing some work matters. Their messages, while seemingly innocuous, hinted at deeper connections and ongoing plans. Michelle's response that Nathan had just woken her up and was trying to leave for work belied a casual tone that masked the gravity of what was unfolding behind the scenes. In the months leading up to this night, Michelle's discontent had grown. She harbored no desire to stay with Nathan, but was equally unenthusiastic about the prospect of leaving him. The thought of divorce brought worries of financial instability and losing the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Moreover, she was painfully aware of the benefits that would come from Nathan's military insurance in the event of his untimely death, an unsettling $650,000 that began to seed dark thoughts in her mind. These thoughts turned into a sinister plot when she shared them with Michael, who found the idea intriguing enough to help formulate a plan. They knew they couldn't pull off such a scheme alone, so they roped in Corey Alexis Hawkins, a known criminal with a history of theft and fraud, who agreed to participate for a hefty $20,000 payout. As the plan expanded, they also enlisted Jessica Austin, Corey's girlfriend, and her friend Shannon, a figure from the adult film industry, promising her a cut of the proceeds. The group devised a chilling plan. Nathan would be shot in his Chevrolet Tahoe, and the vehicle with his body inside would be abandoned in an apartment complex parking lot. Jessica was tasked with buying the necessary items for the crime: men's gloves, a car cover, and a fragrance to mask any smells. Shannon's role was to provide Michael an alibi if needed. On the day of the murder, Michelle, feeling ill, deviated from her usual schedule and arrived home early at around 5:30 p.m. Upon entering, she found Nathan asleep on the sofa. She woke him, suggesting they go upstairs to rest together, marking their last peaceful moment before the impending chaos. As Nathan prepared to leave for work, Michelle was secretly exchanging coded messages with Michael, who was parked near their home in a black Cadillac SRX. With calculated coldness, Michael and his accomplice approached Nathan as he was about to leave, catching him off guard. Knowing the threat Nathan's military training posed, Michael shot him 5 times in the back. The assassins quickly fled the scene, heading to a designated hideout to destroy their clothes and dispose of other incriminating evidence. Michael and Shannon then went to a hotel to establish their alibi, while Jessica meticulously cleaned their temporary apartment. As emergency services and police arrived at the scene, the gravity of the crime began to unfold. Detective Todd Williams took the lead, examining the garage where the shooting occurred. The scene was gruesome, with blood smeared on the walls and floor, and Nathan's uniform lying next to his untouched wallet and keys. The absence of any stolen valuables quickly led the police to rule out robbery as a motive, deepening the mystery of this brutal act in what was considered one of the most exemplary neighborhoods. The investigation was just beginning, and the truth, when uncovered, would shake the community to its core. Detective Laurie Anderson, having meticulously examined the scene of the crime, turned her attention to interviewing Michelle Paillet, the victim's wife. Her initial recount of the events that transpired seemed straightforward enough, but a curious addition about their financial struggles caught the detective's attention. This revelation prompted the police to consider other potential issues. Michelle broke down in tears as the guilty verdict was read, sealing her fate. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, her appeals for leniency overshadowed by the gravity of her betrayal and the premeditated nature of her husband's murder. Corey Hawkins and Jessica Austin also faced the harsh consequences of their involvement. Corey, implicated deeply in the planning and execution of the murder, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jessica, whose role was somewhat lesser yet critical in the cover-up and alibi, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Shannon, having cooperated with the investigation and provided key testimony, received a reduced sentence of 15 years for her part in the conspiracy. The courtroom dramas were marked by the presence of Nathan's grieving family, who sought justice and closure for the brutal slaying of their beloved Nathan. Nathan's mother, Carmelita, and his siblings stood as witnesses to the legal proceedings, their sorrow palpable, yet mixed with a sense of relief as justice was served. In the years that followed, the legacy of Nathan Joseph Pyatt continued to resonate within his community. His sacrifice and dedication were commemorated through various memorials and tributes. The Air Force honored his memory by naming a training facility after him, ensuring that his story would inspire future generations of servicemen and women. The chilling case of Nathan's murder serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the potential for darkness within seemingly ordinary lives. As we reflect on the events that led to his untimely death, we are reminded of the enduring strength of love, the impact of betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Join us in the next episode as we delve deeper into the aftermath of the trials, exploring how Nathan's family coped with their loss, the reforms inspired by his case within the military community, and the lessons we can all learn from the tragic end of a man who lived a life marked by service, love, and ultimately, profound loss. Michelle tearfully apologized to Nathan's parents, claiming that confusion and mistakes had led her down this dark path. However, the judge and prosecutor were unconvinced by her expressions of regret. Facing the potential of capital punishment, Michelle eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm. Demonstrating remarkable compassion, the Pyatt family requested that the death penalty not be applied to Michelle. Corey Hawkins also accepted a plea deal, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jessica Austin struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, during her final sentencing, Michelle cited an unstable emotional state as the impetus for her actions and asked for forgiveness from Nathan's family once more. Carmelita Pyatt, embodying forgiveness and grace, extended mercy to Michelle, though she poignantly noted the irreversible damage Michelle had done to her own children and the broader family. As the court proceedings wrapped up, Eric Pyatt expressed a hope for moving forward without the shadow of this tragedy defining their lives. In contrast, Veronica Pyatt, expressing her disdain for Michelle, underscored the betrayal and its consequences on the family. This tragic story, with its layers of betrayal, love, and loss, leaves a lasting impact not just on the individuals directly involved, but also on the community and those who hear about it. The final message from the narrator, Jack, invites the audience to reflect on the profound effects of our choices and the pursuit of happiness at the expense of others. This tragic story, with its layers of betrayal, love, and loss, leaves a lasting impact not just on the individuals directly involved, but also on the community and those who hear about it. The final message from the narrator, Jack, invites the audience to reflect on the profound effects of our choices and the pursuit of happiness at the expense of others. As the courtroom drama concluded, the community began the difficult process of healing. Nathan's friends and fellow servicemen at Nellis Air Force Base established a scholarship in his name, dedicated to supporting the children of fallen service members. This initiative not only honored Nathan's legacy, but also provided a tangible way to support families facing similar tragedies. In Guam, where Nathan was laid to rest, the local community rallied together, organizing memorial events and vigils. These gatherings served as a space for collective mourning and a reminder of the impact Nathan had on those around him. His story was shared in schools and community centers, emphasizing the importance of integrity, love, and resilience. Michelle's imprisonment and subsequent reflections added a complex layer to the narrative. While serving her sentence, she participated in counselings and educational programs, expressing a desire to understand and atone for her actions. Her journey through the legal system and her attempts at rehabilitation became a point of discussion about the potential for redemption and the limits of forgiveness. The Payet family, despite their immense loss, found ways to move forward. Carmelita, embodying her deep faith, became an advocate for victim support services, working to help other families navigate the aftermath of violent crimes. Eric, Nathan's brother, channeled his grief into writing, penning a memoir that detailed their childhood in Guam, Nathan's dedication to his family and country,
and the tragic events that led to his untimely death.
The story of Sarai Sierra. She traveled across the ocean only to meet her untimely death. The high-profile case of Sarai Sierra, an American photographer, shocked the world 10 years ago and mobilized the intelligence services of 2 countries on different continents. Sarai, a U.S. citizen, mysteriously disappeared without a trace during her photo tour in Istanbul, as if she had vanished into thin air. This story received extensive media coverage, and the peculiar circumstances surrounding her disappearance sparked numerous rumors and conspiracy theories. Despite large-scale and timely search efforts, unfortunately, Sarai was not found alive. Her body was eventually discovered in the historic center of the city, near the walls of Sarayburnu. But how could such a tragic event occur in broad daylight in a popular tourist area without anyone noticing? To understand this case, we need to reconstruct the entire sequence of events that led to this tragedy. Let's begin. Sarai Sierra was born in New York on November 9, 1979, as the second child in a large family. She grew up with her older brother David and younger sister Christina. Her parents, Dennis and Bethany Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican descent and immigrated to the United States in 1973, settling in Manhattan where their children were born. Shortly after their move, the couple joined the local Protestant community and became evangelical Christians, raising their children with strict values and beliefs. Following the religious tenets of their adopted faith, the family attended church regularly, socialized with other community members, and the children attended Sunday school. Sarai grew up to be an active and creative person, known for her strong-willed and complex character. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, obedient, and modest, Sarai was considered a rebel and a bit of a troublemaker. Despite her rebellious streak, she respected her parents and acknowledged their undisputed authority. In the Jimenez household, there were strict rules that all family members had to follow. This included the daily routines, many everyday activities, and specific behavioral norms. For example, the daughters were not allowed to socialize with boys, go on dates, or be out of the house after 9 p.m. All their friendships were closely monitored, and their parents always knew where and with whom their children were. Sarai's life revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle was limited to these environments. The active and energetic Sarai felt constrained by these strict boundaries, but her parents believed they were acting in their children's best interest. During her school years, Sarai initially planned to attend a pedagogical university to become a teacher in the field of culture or arts. However, as she neared the end of her studies, she developed an interest in psychology and began considering a career in this field. It was during one of the religious community meetings that the slender, dark-haired beauty caught the eye of a young man named Stephen Sierra. He was the first to approach her and make an impression. At just 18 years old, Sarai made an excuse to start a conversation with someone new. Her new acquaintance was 7 years older than her. Despite the age difference and with the approval of their parents, the young couple began dating. Stephen, Sarai's father, and her mother, Bethany, immediately liked Dennis. They saw him as a decent, polite, and honest young man who would be a good match for their daughter. Sarai probably wasn't deeply in love with Dennis, but agreed to marry him to gain independence and move out of her parents' house, despite having a good relationship with them. Less than a year after meeting, in February 1999, the couple married. Sarai was 19 and Dennis was 26. Shortly after, they moved to Michigan, where Stephen's parents lived. For Sarai, this move was significant, as she had spent all her life in New York. The change of scenery was beneficial, and she seemed to come alive in her new surroundings. Sarai enjoyed shopping for items for their new home, making it cozy and exploring new acquaintances and places. She found a job as a receptionist at a local dental office and considered pursuing a college degree. However, she soon became pregnant and had children. A boy first, then a girl. Her university plans were postponed as she fully embraced motherhood. A couple of years later, the family, now with 2 children, decided to move to sunny California, settling in the picturesque neighborhood of Silver Lake in Los Angeles. Stephen had a job offer there, but they soon realized his income wasn't enough. They decided to return to New York, settling in a modest rented apartment near the Jimenez family. The couple faced serious financial problems. Sarai stayed home with the children while Stephen survived on casual income, leading them into debt. The situation improved when the children went to school, and Sarai got a job at an advertising agency. Stephen found permanent work as a bus driver on one of the city routes. As Sarai approached 30 and the children grew up, she revisited her plans for higher education. She decided against studying pedagogy and chose psychology instead, enrolling at a local university. However, she soon lost interest in her studies and decided to pursue something more inspiring and creative. Sarai had always been creative, with a talent for drawing and seeing beauty in everything. She became interested in photography and joined a well-known New York photography community. She gained recognition for her talent, capturing incredible shots with the right angles and harmonious compositions. Her work was praised by professionals for its creativity and vision. In early 2012, on her colleagues' advice, Sarai created a page on a popular social network to showcase her work. She quickly gained thousands of enthusiastic followers. This success motivated her to organize group photo tours to capture beautiful and unusual locations around the world. Sarai started with small trips within the country, specializing in architectural ensembles and historical monuments. Her images were well received, and she decided to expand her horizons. Sarai wanted to travel to Istanbul, one of the world's most ancient and beautiful cities, to capture its essence and historical sites. Her parents were not thrilled about this idea, as she had never left the country before, but Sarai was determined. She planned to be accompanied by her best friend, Magdalena. During this period, Sarai's relationship with her husband was deteriorating, and perhaps this trip was also a way for her to escape and reflect on her family situation. Sarai's husband began posting cryptic messages on social media about the value of marriage, love, and mutual respect, hinting at infidelity but later deleting the posts. Both Sarai and Stephen were experiencing emotional turmoil, but Sarai focused on her creativity. Shortly before the planned tour, Sarai learned that her best friend couldn't join her due to work issues. Despite her disappointment, Sarai decided to go ahead with her plans. reassuring her family that she would stay in touch daily. In addition to Istanbul, she planned to visit Germany and Austria for commercial photography assignments. Her trip was meticulously planned, with a clear vision of capturing the beauty of these historical sites. On January 7, 2013, a young American woman named Sarai boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul, carrying only a small amount of cash, a smartphone, a tablet, an inexpensive DSLR camera, and several professional lenses. Upon arrival, Sarai called her family to let them know she had arrived safely and was on her way to check into her pre-booked hotel. Due to her modest budget, she stayed in a remote area considered unsafe by locals. After settling into her room and changing clothes, Sarai immediately headed to the nearest metro station to explore the historic city center of Istanbul. She spent the day wandering the streets, photographing the city's beauty until nightfall. Each evening, she video called her parents and husband to share her experiences and plans for the next day. She also processed her photos and posted them on her social media accounts. During her time in Istanbul, Sarai was accompanied by a young man named Taylan, whom she had met on social media in mid-2012. Taylan had convinced Sarai to visit Turkey, and they had grown close through their correspondence. Sarai trusted Taylan completely, and they met almost every day, exploring various attractions together. Being a native of Istanbul, Taylan knew the city well and arranged exciting excursions for Sarai to both popular and unusual locations. After spending a week in Turkey, Sarai had planned trips to a couple of European countries where she had several commercial photo shoots scheduled. To save on accommodation costs, she arranged to stay with her followers who had been long-time admirers of her work. In Vienna, she was met by a young man who was also passionate about photography and hosted her for a couple of days. Her Austrian host was a few years older and eager to meet the talented photographer in person. Sarai visited all her planned locations and met her scheduled contacts. Following her time in Austria, Sarai flew to Berlin, where she was again greeted by followers who showed her around the city. After completing her business in Germany, she returned to Istanbul, planning to stay 2 more days before heading back to New York. Upon her return, Taylan met her, and they spent the day touring the city before going to a popular local bar. After midnight, Taylan escorted Sarai back to her hotel, where they said goodbye. On January 21st, 2013, the final day of her photo tour, Sarai called her family to inform them of her flight details back to New York. Excited to return home after her longest trip away, she decided to take one last walk around Istanbul to capture more beautiful shots for her account. At the appointed time, Sarai's father arrived at the airport to pick her up, as her husband was at work. He arrived early to avoid traffic, but grew concerned when Sarai did not disembark from the plane, and her phone was unreachable. After waiting, her father contacted the airline and was shocked to learn that Sarai had not boarded the flight. He immediately called Stephen, Sarai's husband, to inform him of the situation and the need to organize a search. Stephen contacted the Istanbul hotel, only to find that Sarai's belongings were still in her room and she had not checked out as planned. This news sent the family into a panic, as they realized they had no idea where Sarai was or how to proceed. Stephen accessed Sarai's social media accounts, looking for clues, and discovered her correspondence with Taylan, which raised his suspicions. He contacted Taylan, who claimed to have last seen Sarai the day before her scheduled departure. Before her flight, Sarai didn't call Taylan, despite having promised to do so. Sarai's family promptly reported her disappearance to the American embassy in Turkey, leading to a large-scale search operation. A special unit was even created for the search, and within a day, Saray's husband and parents flew to Istanbul, believing their presence was crucial for a swift resolution given the short time since her disappearance. The investigating officers first sought to determine Saray's social circle and speak with those who saw her shortly before she vanished. Hotel employees in Thailand were among the first to be interviewed. The hotel manager mentioned seeing Sarai the night before she was supposed to leave, noting she had a small bag and her camera. She was expected to check out the next day, but never did, and her husband had called the hotel worriedly when her belongings and documents were found still in her room. The investigation into Thailand revealed several interesting and ambiguous details. His real name was Taron, not Thailand, raising questions about why he had used an alias. Despite their close correspondence and Sarai's visit at his invitation, Taron insisted there was no romantic relationship, claiming they were just friends. The next phase of the investigation involved retracing Sarai's route on the day of her disappearance. Authorities checked her cell phone data and reviewed street CCTV footage. It was established that she took the subway to the Sultanahmet district, visited the promontory between the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn Bay, and then Eminonu Market, where she was lost in a crowd. Her trail was briefly picked up again on the subway, heading towards the ancient walls of the Suritsi area, but she soon vanished from camera view. Searchers combed the area around the Suritsi ruins and interviewed locals, hoping someone might remember seeing a lone woman with a camera. After several hours, the search ended in a grim discovery. Near the ancient walls of Constantinople, they found the lifeless body of a young woman covered with an old, dirty blanket. Investigators believed the body had been there for about 10 to 12 days. The lower part of her body was unclothed, suggesting sexual violence, which was later confirmed. The autopsy revealed Sarai died from a blow to the head with a blunt object. She also had multiple hematomas and broken ribs. Particles of epithelial cells and blood under her fingernails indicated she had fought back. Strangely, while Sarai's bag, smartphone, and camera were stolen, her gold earrings, wedding ring, and expensive watch were not taken. CCTV footage from the area showed a woman resembling Sarai filming something on her phone before a man approached her, either hitting or pushing her, after which both disappeared from view. The attacker's identity was not immediately clear. The case quickly garnered international media attention, nearly provoking a scandal. Media appeals for information on the missing American woman became a daily occurrence, while the investigation remained tight-lipped. When Sarai's body was discovered, the situation grew more complex. Questions arose about why a young married woman had flown alone to Istanbul, what she was doing there, and how she funded her travels. These circumstances led to various conspiracy theories. Initially, investigators suspected Sarai had traveled to see her lover, Taron, and later another man in Austria. However, both men denied any intimate relationship with her. It was also revealed that the man who hosted Sarai in Vienna had a criminal record, leading to speculation that Sarai might have been used as a drug courier. Despite the theories, the exact circumstances of Sarai's tragic death remained a mystery, clouded by suspicion and unanswered questions. Despite thorough investigations, no evidence confirmed the speculation. There were also rumors that Sarai worked for US intelligence, collecting information in other countries, supposedly funding her intercontinental flights. This theory was deemed implausible and wasn't seriously considered. The investigation of this high-profile case was conducted by Turkish Special Services along with the FBI, but initially, they had no solid leads. A few weeks later, the police identified a suspect, Tal Salih, a previously convicted and unemployed man who collected waste paper on the city streets. However, they couldn't question him because, shortly after the crime, He borrowed money from relatives and fled the country, presumably to the Hatti province, where he illegally crossed the border into Syria. After obtaining a warrant, police searched his home and collected his DNA, comparing it to the skin particles and seminal fluid found on the victim's body. This evidence confirmed that Tal Salih was the perpetrator. Additionally, the victim's phone was last active in his neighborhood. When it became known that the suspect had fled to Syria, the special services lost hope of apprehending him. However, fate intervened. Tal Salih was detained while trying to cross the border back into Turkey. He had joined Syrian rebels and obtained firearms but was injured in the conflict and decided to return home. He was arrested for carrying a weapon, and the local police soon realized his identity, promptly notifying the security services. During questioning, Tal Salih's confession was horrifying. He encountered Sarai on a hiking trail near the walls of Sebiru. Initially, he admired her from a distance as she took pictures. When he got closer, Sarai tried to communicate using gestures, but due to the language barrier, he didn't understand. He noticed her new iPhone and expensive camera and decided to rob her. As darkness fell and the area became deserted, Sarai turned and seemed to photograph him, triggering his violent response. He attacked her with a boulder, knocking her unconscious. They tumbled down to the ruins, which likely caused her bruises and broken ribs. Taking advantage of her unconsciousness, he committed sexual assault, then delivered a fatal blow to her head. He took her bag, camera, and phone and left, later returning to cover her body with a blanket he found discarded nearby. He dragged the body to a less visible spot and left again. While the search for Sarai was ongoing, he revisited the crime scene to ensure she was dead and her body was undisturbed. When he learned from the news that her body had been found, he realized the police would soon catch him. He borrowed money from his sister and fled. He couldn't sell the stolen items. The camera was broken and the smartphone was password protected. He discarded everything before fleeing. Tal Salih did not deny his guilt and showed no remorse. DNA evidence confirmed his involvement. His skin particles were under her fingernails, and his seminal fluid was found on her body. Sarai's phone was last active near his residence, and video surveillance footage captured the attack, involving an innocent victim caught in her spouse's twisted passion. There's a saying that it's nearly impossible to re-educate an adult because their personality, views, way of thinking, preferences, character, and temperament are already well formed. However, some women believe that with patience and pedagogical talent, they can work wonders. More experienced women understand the importance of evaluating a man's flaws from the very beginning, deciding whether they can live with them, as infatuation and passion will fade, and negative qualities often worsen with age. When it comes to serious issues such as addictions, a pathological tendency to lie, and violence, it's best to walk away without looking back. But many women experience what's known as the rescuer syndrome, an acute and irrepressible desire to help, even at the cost of their own well-being. This syndrome devastated a young British woman named Vicky Roberts. For almost 3 years, she fought for her love, attempting to reform her cheating husband with sadistic tendencies. Tragically, all her efforts led only to pain, humiliation, and cruelty. Vicky Roberts, born Victoria Smith in September 1984 in Cheshire, northwest England, was the younger of 2 daughters in a conservative and deeply religious family. She attended a Christian school with her sister, practices music, and sang in the choir. Those who knew her described her as kind, friendly, and always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Vicky went on to university and took a job at an IKEA store to pay for her education. It was during her time at IKEA that Vicky met a young man named Michael Roberts. They initially formed a friendly relationship. Michael, just a year older than Vicky, also worked at IKEA while studying. He was athletic, took good care of himself, and made a favorable impression on others. Although Vicky initially found Michael's sociable and charismatic nature a bit too talkative and intrusive, he quickly won her over. Michael Roberts was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, and was the eldest of two sons in a family headed by a prominent chemical engineer. His parents raised their children with strict expectations, especially for Michael, who was ambitious, goal-oriented, and academically successful. He was popular, often the life of the party, and proud of his romantic conquests. With his attractive appearance, tall and fit physique, good sense of humor, and intelligence, he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. Michael's parents instilled in him a belief in his superiority, nurturing a narcissistic disorder that worsened with age. Despite his confidence, he was always eager to please his parents, striving to be the perfect son. Michael never had a permanent girlfriend. He frequently changed partners and juggled multiple relationships without any of his lovers realizing they were not exclusive. He viewed the pursuit of seemingly unattainable girls as a game or competition, and Vicky, with her modest and reserved nature, became his next target. Initially, Vicky resisted Michael's advances, focusing on her studies and spending weekends at church. She wasn't interested in dating or relationships. However, Michael's persistence paid off after several months. He charmed her with sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and surprises. He even invited her to a family dinner, where his parents warmly approved of Vicky. She believed in his seriousness and eventually reciprocated his feelings, making Michael her first and only love. She felt truly happy and saw their relationship as destined. For a while, Michael seemed genuinely in love and ready to settle down. However, this didn't last. Despite their seemingly perfect romance, Vicky soon realized that Michael had an insatiable sexual appetite and a penchant for experimentation.
Initially, he was cautious, fearing Vicky might leave him. But once he was confident she wouldn't, he revealed his true nature. Vicky, a modest and religious girl, was shocked but deeply in love and trusted Michael, keeping their bedroom activities a secret. Michael proposed to Vicky, and she gladly accepted, hoping that marriage would change him and end his experiments. However, things didn't improve. Vicky confided in one of her closest friends about what was happening. Friends began to notice that Vicky was carefully hiding bruises and small marks under her clothes. One friend, concerned, initiated a candid conversation and asked if her fiancé was abusing her and if she needed help. Vicky initially denied everything, but eventually admitted that the marks were the result of Michael's intimate experiments. Michael had a particular passion for bondage and the use of various toys and devices. Vicky also confided that their intimacy occurred up to 5 times a day, yet Michael remained unsatisfied. Michael viewed himself as a skilled lover, seeing intimacy as an art and a means of self-expression. Sometimes he would compromise when Vicky refused to participate in dangerous experiments, but more often than not, he persuaded her to comply. After Vicky defended her diploma, she decided to change jobs and was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retail chain. Thanks to his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills, he quickly excelled and was promoted to senior sales, with management considering him for a transfer to the main office after further training. Michael thrived on attending training sessions and business trips, often to London, and seemed to forget about his fiancée, remembering her only when he needed intimacy. They rarely spent time together outside the bedroom, and Vicky felt increasingly isolated. During this period, Michael began having affairs with colleagues, clients, and casual acquaintances, becoming obsessed with new conquests to maintain his self-esteem. When Vicky discovered she was pregnant, she happily shared the news with Michael, hoping it would prompt him to expedite their wedding plans. Instead, Michael reacted with anger, insisting that they were too young and had their whole lives ahead of them to have children later. Shocked, Vicky refused to terminate the pregnancy. Michael then tried to manipulate her by suggesting that the news would infuriate her religious parents, who would disapprove of their unwed daughter being pregnant. He assured her that terminating the pregnancy would be a secret, and they could have children after the wedding. After much persuasion, Vicky reluctantly agreed to an abortion. Unfortunately, complications arose, requiring her to stay in the hospital for several days and take nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly forbade any intimate activity. Michael, enraged by this restriction, began leaving the house daily under the pretense of urgent work matters. Vicky suspected he was seeking intimacy elsewhere but hoped things would change once they married, and she could help him overcome his addiction. Their engagement dragged on for nearly 2 years, with no wedding in sight. Michael seemed content with the status quo, a fiancé who faithfully waited for him at home and took care of household duties, and a string of mistresses on the side. Vicky, always hopeful for a better future, continued to endure the situation, believing she could eventually help him change. Vicky took Michael at his word, forgiving him each time he promised that his infidelity would be the last. However, as time passed, Vicky began to insist on marriage, yearning for a full-fledged family and children. Her parents also pressured her about this, and Michael's parents, who were fond of modest and sweet Vicky, frequently inquired about their wedding plans and potential grandchildren. Not wanting to disappoint his parents, Michael finally agreed to marry Vicky. With their parents' help, the couple organized a lavish wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared in love and happy, though few could guess the dark side of Michael that Vicky already knew well. The couple settled in a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, near Michael's parents. Despite the outward appearance of normalcy, Michael did not love Vicky. For him, the marriage served to maintain a facade of respectability while allowing him to continue his numerous affairs. Vicky never complained about his peculiarities or constant cheating, so Michael continued to change mistresses frequently. Professionally, he was successful, receiving promotions and making good money after being transferred to a new office. Michael's new boss, Carrie Hall, was the head of administration at Phones 4U. She was 10 years older, divorced, and raising a son. Attractive, well-groomed, and strong-willed, Carrie initially ignored Michael's advances. However, Michael, seeing this as a challenge, employed all his charm and eloquence to win her over. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated, and they began meeting regularly in hotel rooms. Their relationship was passionate and experimental, with Carrie, a mature and self-confident woman, enjoying the attention and the chance to try new things. Michael lied to Vicky about his late nights at work and corporate training, while telling Carrie how unhappy he was in his marriage, portraying it as a youthful mistake and claiming that Vicky refused to grant him a divorce. This affair lasted more than a year, with Carrie content to keep their meetings casual and discreet, having no illusions about Michael. During her relationship with Michael, Carrie began wearing clothing that concealed her figure, long sleeves and high collars, an unusual choice for her. When a close friend asked about this change, Carrie confided that Michael's intimate experiments sometimes left marks on her body. She showed the friend a bite mark on her chest and blue marks on her neck and wrists, explaining that Michael enjoyed having complete control over her, sometimes going to dangerous extremes like strangulation, which had caused her to lose consciousness a couple of times. Though the friend suggested going to the police, Carrie refused, asserting that everything was consensual. Vicky, too, was subjected to Michael's dangerous games, but always believed that one day he would tire of them or that she would get used to them. Unfortunately, neither Vicky nor any of Michael's mistresses attempted to stop him. Vicky had long suspected Michael's infidelities even before their marriage, and likely realized his addiction to these behaviors. She believed her love and care could eventually transform Michael into an exemplary family man, but this hope was in vain. After the wedding, the situation only worsened. Michael continued to deny his cheating convincingly, but Vicky decided to investigate on her own. While he was asleep, she checked his phone and found numerous intimate messages with Carrie and several other girls, including explicit photos. Shocked, Vicky packed her things and moved in with a friend. She didn't tell her parents or sister, fearing to upset them and knowing her religious family would insist on a divorce. Despite everything, Vicky was still in love and didn't want to break up with her husband. Before leaving, she wrote Michael a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and expressing her awareness of his infidelity. She explained that she couldn't tolerate it any longer and was leaving, but wouldn't file for divorce yet, giving him time to reflect. She left the letter on the refrigerator with a magnet. However, Michael was unmoved by her departure and only cared about not losing his compliant and devoted wife. That evening, Michael followed Vicky to her friend's house with a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized on his knees, begging her to return and promising she would be his only woman from now on. Vicky, wanting to believe him, returned home. Despite his promises, Michael didn't leave Carrie and continued seeing other women. For a while, he was more cautious, even coming home for dinners Vicky prepared. He hid his phone, deleted messages, and changed his social media passwords. During this time, he began an affair with a new young employee, Karen Wilson, without ending his relationship with Carrie. Karen was engaged and planning her wedding, but Michael pursued her relentlessly, portraying himself as a miserable lover trapped in an unhappy marriage. After 2 months, he broke up with Carrie, who he had grown tired of, and convinced Karen he was ready to leave his wife for her. They had an intimate encounter in the office, and a week later, Karen broke off her engagement, waiting for Michael to follow through on his promises. Michael, however, had no intention of divorcing Vicky or ending his relationship with Karen. He lied, claiming he had filed for divorce and moved in with his parents. Vicky soon suspected her husband was still cheating and decided to take definitive action. She took his phone while he was in the shower but found nothing, as he had learned from his previous mistakes, and deleted all incriminating texts and changed his social media password. Determined, Vicky waited until Michael fell asleep and checked his work laptop, where he hadn't logged out of his social media account. There she found messages with a new girlfriend, in which Michael professed his love and claimed he was divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Devastated, Vicky took screenshots of the messages and saved them on her laptop as proof of his infidelity. She also found folded hotel room receipts in his wallet, further confirming his unfaithfulness. The next morning, Vicky confronted her spouse with everything she had discovered. For the first time in their relationship, she unleashed a scandal. Michael was distraught, trying to apologize and promising it would never happen again. But Vicky, exasperated, threatened to tell his parents hoping they could make him see reason since she couldn't. Michael was infuriated by the threat. He didn't want his parents to know anything. In a fit of rage, he slapped his wife. Vicky, undeterred, stood up and announced she would go to his parents immediately. She headed for the door, but Michael caught up with her, hitting her twice in the head with a heavy jewelry box from the dressing table. When she lost consciousness, he strangled her until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, he wrapped her body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried the gruesome bundle to his garage. Michael then swiftly cleaned up the house, packed away most of his wife's belongings, and called Karen, inviting her over. They had dinner and fun in the house where just hours earlier, Michael had killed his wife. They even made love in the bedroom where the crime had occurred. The next day, Michael informed his parents that his wife had left him for another man. He visited them in person, sobbing on his mother's shoulder and showing her messages from Vicky's phone, messages he had sent himself. The messages claimed Vicky had fallen out of love and decided to live with another man. His parents, bewildered, consoled him, struggling to understand how their sweet, kind, and religious daughter-in-law could do such a thing. Meanwhile, Michael sent similar messages to Vicky's parents from her phone, asking them not to bother her and give her time. Suspicious, Vicky's parents tried calling her, but the calls were rejected, with only messages responding. Concerned, they went to Michael's house, but his story only raised more questions. When Vicky failed to show up for work without any notice, they decided to go to the police. On December 1st, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, several meters of rope, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, he didn't manage to dispose of the body because the police visited him that same day. They found nothing suspicious initially, but Michael's behavior and story raised doubts. Strangely, they overlooked the large package in the garage. Inside the house, there were no clothes, documents, or personal belongings of the missing woman, suggesting she hadn't left voluntarily. Vicky's laptop was found in the bedroom, and the police seized it. On the laptop, they discovered screenshots of Michael's correspondence with his mistresses, saved by Vicky. They then decided to trace Vicky's cell phone, which had been sending regular messages to her husband and relatives. The phone's location revealed it had been in the marital home all along. The police returned for a thorough search, finally unwrapping the suspicious package in the garage. The discovery shocked everyone. During the search, Michael had been with the police, but he managed to slip away unnoticed, taking a wallet with cash. He hid for several days without being detected. When his money ran out, Michael sought refuge with one of his mistresses, Lavinia T. That evening, Lavinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder and immediately reported his whereabouts to the police. At the time of his arrest, Michael was crying, insisting he was innocent and claiming his wife's death was an accident during an intimate game where he had accidentally strangled her. However, forensic experts found that Vicky had been strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 extensive hematomas on her head, injuries inconsistent with his story. Michael's trial began in January 2010. He continued to claim his wife's death was accidental, hoping for leniency. However, the autopsy results presented by experts proved otherwise. Michael had coldly hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her before hiding the body in the garage. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of applying for parole after 17 years. Thus, Michael has a chance of being released in 2027. The community was in shock as news of Vicky's murder spread. Vicky was well loved, known for her kindness and involvement in local charities. Vigils were held in her memory, with friends, family, and community members mourning the loss of a vibrant and compassionate woman. Michael's parents were devastated, grappling with the dual horrors of losing their daughter-in-law and facing the reality that their son was responsible for her death. The betrayal cut deep, leaving them to question how they had missed the signs and failed to intervene. During the trial, the prosecution meticulously laid out the evidence against Michael. Vicky's parents attended every court session, determined to see justice served. Michael's defense tried to paint a picture of a man driven to a desperate act by stress and marital discord, but the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The court's verdict of life imprisonment was a relief to Vicky's family, though it did little to ease their grief. After his conviction, Michael's lawyers filed several appeals, arguing procedural errors and claiming new evidence. However, each appeal was denied, reinforcing the strength of the original verdict. The legal battles kept the family in a state of limbo, reopening wounds each time a new hearing was announced. The Smith family struggled to move on. Vicky's parents, once a lively and social couple, became more reclusive, their grief palpable in every interaction. They established a foundation in Vicky's name to support victims of domestic violence, channeling their sorrow into advocacy and support for others in similar situations. This work gave them a renewed sense of purpose and a way to honor their daughter's memory. Michael's parents faced social ostracism from the community. Friends and neighbors, unsure how to respond, often kept their distance. Despite the judgment from others, they continued to visit Michael in prison, hoping to understand what drove their son to such a horrific act. They also sought therapy to deal with their conflicting emotions of love for their son and horror at his crime. In prison, Michael was initially resistant to any form of rehabilitation. He maintained his innocence for years, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. However, over time and through mandatory counseling sessions, he began to confront the reality of what he had done. This slow process of acknowledgement and the weight of his guilt started to break through his denial.